Okay, now we're going to deal with chapter 5, page 5 notes, and we just went through, in the previous video, we went through the demonstration of the code, so we've got that on page 4. And what I'd like to do before we move on to page 5 is we want to highlight the if statements. And so if you have a highlighter, it says here highlight the if statements, the else if statements, and the else statements. So let's go and do that. And so here's an if statement, here's an else statement in that program. Now in the other program you have an if statement, you have an else if statement, and then you have an else statement. Alright, now in here then we want to start going on through the notes. And you know, let's just do this other thing here that I have on the notes. This is label the alternatives in the example code. So if we were going to label the alternatives, how could we do this? We could do, well, somehow what you want to do is you will want to, let's see here, we want to go with one alternative is this. So this is an alternative. Alright, and this is if they pass, if they get it greater than 70, we're going to say congratulations. The other alternative is right here in the else clause, and that is going to be if they get a score less than 70, we're going to tell them this message. Those are two alternatives. Right, and then on the other program, you want to label your alternative. First alternative is if they get greater than or equal to 90. Why does this keep changing on me? It's not supposed to do that. So this is going to be our first alternative. If they get greater than 90, we're going to tell them they got an A. If they got greater than 70 but less than 90, then we're just going to tell them they passed. So that's the second alternative, and the third is again less than 60. Right? Those are the alternatives. So the first thing in your notes is it says the else statement is the blank alternative. And so what you'll do is you'll notice here that on all of these, that the else in the first one, oh, you know what I need to do? Let's just pause for a second. Okay, so as far as talking about what else is, as far as alternatives go, then we'll notice then that the else deals with the last alternative. And then in here you have else again. So you have the if, else if, and else. So else is the last. So that in your notes, the else statement, number 1, the else statement is the last alternative. Else accommodates all remaining possibilities. Okay, that's the second statement there. Else accommodates all remaining implied possibilities. So here's what that means. If we take a look at the second example, we will see then that the if part of this program, that this accommodates all the numbers that are greater than 90. So they're going to cover 90 and up, all the way to million, 2 million, 3 million, or whatever. Although that's not going to work, but it covers every number above that. Alright, this one covers everything from 70 to 89. So this is taken from 70 all the way up. Okay, the only numbers that remain by implication are all going to be less than 60. And so that's what the else says is it's all the numbers less than 60 because that's what's left over. That's why we don't have a Boolean expression. There's no Boolean expression here because it's implied that this is going to take care of all the remaining possibilities, which is all the less than 60s. And so then the next line, it says else is executed when the if and else if Boolean expressions are false. Else is executed when the if and all else if Boolean expressions are false. So let's take a look at that. If the percentage, let's say that the user enters input and the percentage ends up being 60 again. Okay, so when it calls this, and this is false. This is false. So since they're both false, it's left to do this. And this will be done as long as these are both false. Now, if this was, let's say, 80 instead, well, maybe it'll skip this one, but once it gets to 80 here, this is true. And so the compiler will execute these lines and ignore these two. Alright, then we go on, and the next thing it says now we have examples on our notes. And so here is, oops, I didn't do that right. Okay, so here we are, examples. If you have two alternatives, you're going to do an if and an else. If you have four alternatives, what you would do is an if, two else ifs, and then an else. This is just examples how it could work. Now, notice how else is the last alternative. But just to keep in mind, it is okay for else if to be the last alternative, but it's going to be important that you test your code to make sure that it does what you want it to do, because sometimes else if will work for what you want to do and other times it will not work. So as a general rule, we do else unless you come up with an idea where that's where else if is going to serve your purpose. And as we go on down here, it says these are things that in class I ask the students to do this without me saying anything first. So C and D, so if you want to do that you can. If there are 6 alternatives, how many if statements are there? So by looking at these examples, what would happen? Well, if you notice that there's only one if statement in both of these situations. And so there's only going to be one if statement all the time. And then the else if statements, well, there's only, let's go to else. Else, there's only one else. It's the last alternative. The else statement is the last alternative we set up here. So it's not the second to last and the last, it's the last. And so there's only one else statement. And so we have all the rest are else ifs. So 1, 2, if we have 6 alternatives, that means that we need 4 else ifs. So go back down to 9, one alternative, one if statement, one else. There are 7 left to make 9, so it's going to have 7 else if statements. Alright, that's how that goes. Now we move on. Notice that else statements do not include something, and we've already talked about that. Here's a Boolean expression right here. Here's a Boolean expression in the else if. No Boolean expression in the else. And then the next line, we say besides if clauses, you have 2 other clauses, and that should be obvious, is that you have did I say if clause? Yes, I did. So you have the if clauses, that if clause that goes along with the if statement. You have the else if clause that goes with the else if statement, and you have the else clause that goes with the else statement. Only one clause of an if-else structure will be executed. Only one clause of an if-else structure, and that's very important to catch that. The compiler evaluates each Boolean expression in order until it finds one whose value is true. Once he finds a Boolean expression that's true, then the compiler then executes the respective clause. Okay, so the respective clause is executed. And then the compiler ignores the remaining alternatives of the if-else structure. And it moves on to the line of code after the if-else structure. So to show how that works, which we've already demonstrated, but just to make sure that we're clear here, what's going to happen is we're saying that only one of these clauses is going to be executed. So you have this clause, and this clause, but only one will be executed. The compiler evaluates, so let's say it's 80 is the percentage. So in that case, it will look here and it'll say this is false, so it ignores this. And then it goes here, 80, and it goes, I found one that's true. I'm going to execute this clause. So this is executed. And then, as the notes say, then the compiler ignores the remaining alternatives. Well, there's one more alternative, it's ignored. And then it moves on now to the statement following the if-else structure. Okay, that's how it works. And one thing to note here is that let's say that the percentage was 95. Well, it says, okay, I found my true already. I found the true Boolean expression already. So I'm going to execute this, and then I'm going to ignore the other two alternatives, and then execute that statement. That's how it works. Let's go on to the next one. It says the else clause is executed only if all the Boolean expressions in the if-else structure are false. And that's what we've already demonstrated. If this is false, ignored. This is false, ignored. Then it will do this. And that's the only way it'll work. Alright, so now we're going to do one more thing in the questions. Why doesn't it execute both the if and the else if clauses? Why does it not execute both the if and the else if clauses? Okay, as I was thinking about it, I actually said that question wrong because I didn't read the first part of it. But it says in the second example on page 95, or on page 4, which we're looking at now, let's say that 95 is the percentage. Well, the thing is that 95 makes this Boolean expression true, and it makes this Boolean expression true. So why doesn't it execute both clauses? That's the question. So if you were to look in your notes and go, well, what tells me why? Well, the one thing that you could look at is in number 4. It says that only one clause of an if-else structure will be executed. So that's one reason why, is because our notes are saying only one of them can be executed. Well, then the next question is, how does the compiler know which one to execute? How does it know it's the first one or the second one? Well, and it's basically because of this sentence right here. It says the compiler evaluates each Boolean expression in order. So it starts with the first one it sees until it finds the one whose value is true. So once it does that, the respective clause is executed and the compiler ignores the remaining. And so the reason then is that if it's a 95, it's going to look at this first one because it goes in order, and it's going to say this is true, and then it's going to execute this and then ignore the rest. That's how it knows which one it's going to do, because that's how it's built in to the system. Alright, so that is all that we're going to do on this video, because we're already at 15 minutes, which is too long. And so part B, the question B on here, you'll want to find out from another student or come see me in class or outside of class so that we can show you what's going on, because this will be important to understand this procedure.